Okay, this will be lesson number 4 for 11th grade. Okay, we're still going to be talking about statistics. Okay, in this lesson, we're just going to cover what are the measures of dispersion, where do we get them, okay, and on the next video lesson, we'll put it into exercises. Okay, now, if we use our books, okay, you'll find this topic, I forgot to put it, sorry, on page 106. Okay, so in case you want to check the definitions on your books, it's on page 106. Okay, now let's talk about what are measures of dispersion. Okay, there are 4 different ways in which we can get measures of dispersion. Okay, we have range, we have the mean absolute deviation, we have the variance, and we have the standard deviation. Okay, we're going to read the definition of each. Okay, here are the formulas, okay, that we need, okay, for the range. We already know it, but let's review it. For the mean absolute deviation, okay, the word absolute comes from absolute value, okay, because since we're talking about a distance, okay, even though we might have a negative answer, but distances can never be negative. Okay, so that means that when we're talking about absolute value, okay, let's say that I walked 3 kilometers. Can I say that I walked negative 3 kilometers? No, right? Even though a mathematical formula can calculate that I walked minus 3 kilometers, but the answer, since it's distance, can never be negative. Okay, so that's why we have an absolute value. Okay? And we need this one, okay, which is just the standard deviation, to bring it into the mean absolute deviation. Okay? And we have certain things that we need from previous formulas. Okay, remember, this x comes from here, which are the formulas from the previous lesson, where we knew that it's the sum of the frequencies divided by the number of data. Okay, when we put it into examples, it's going to get easier. Okay, right now it looks like a bunch of numbers, a bunch of letters, but when we talk about each formula, we'll know where they come from. Okay, so when we're talking about the measures of dispersion, we have range, mean absolute value, we have the variance, and we have a standard deviation. Okay, so if you notice, practically they're all very similar. Okay, they all come from the mean absolute deviation. Okay, because if you notice the variance, it's the same formula, but elevated to the square. Okay, and the standard deviation, it's the same formula, but the square root of that variance. Okay, so these formulas, they look complicated, but once we know where they come from, it's going to get easier. Okay, so let's talk about the range. Okay, the range, okay, of a data set is the difference between the highest and the lowest value. Okay, so that's why when we have the formula, we know that it's the maximum number of all of the data minus the minimum value of the data. Okay, so that's how we get the range. Okay, let's talk about mean absolute deviation. Okay, the absolute deviation of an individual value x from the mean is equal to the absolute value of difference between the individual values in the data set and the mean. Okay, so that means that here, what we have, first we need to calculate the mean, which comes from here. Okay, so it's the sum of the frequency with the class marks, okay, divided by the data. So this is a specific number. Okay, so what we do is we subtract the mean, okay, from the number that we're looking for. Okay, that way we bring it here, and we're talking about the sum of each, okay, frequency, okay, with respect to the mean. Okay, like I said, when we put it into numbers, it's going to get easier. Okay, so what we do with the absolute deviation is that we put it into the mean absolute deviation. Okay, so when we have it here, we're only talking about deviation. Okay, but when we put it into the formula, okay, if you notice, this is over here, but it's the sum of each frequency with respect to each mean. Okay, so that means that when we put it in the formula, it becomes the mean absolute deviation. Okay, now when we actually get this number, when we elevate it to the square, okay, that's how we get the variance. Okay? Now, let's read from our books on page 106. What is the variance? Okay, the variance is the mean of the squares of the distance of each data item x from the mean. Okay, so we're talking about the distance between each data number from the mean. Okay, remember that the mean is calculated here. Okay? And the standard deviation is the principal square root of the variance. Okay, so that means that we calculate the variance and then we put the square root, and that's how we get the standard deviation. Okay? Now the standard deviation, okay, for ungrouped data, like the set of information of the first example, okay, is going to give us a number. Okay, so we're going to do them both. Okay, and we're going to use the information that we have on page 105, okay, so that we can put it into these examples. Okay? So to use with this video lesson, we're going to need the group of information that we have also on page 105. So this is so that you can remember. Okay, we're going to need this information. Okay, this frequency table. Okay, with this information, this is the group of data that's already, in order. Okay, and we're going to use it with this information, okay, with these formulas, so that we can find each value. Okay? So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take this information, put it to the right, and then we're going to work on this side with examples.